Hello, my name's Emily Milich, and I'm going to be talking with you about women's fashion in the Middle East and the Western impact. Just as a quick overview, we're going to talk about the clothing brand SHUKR, the topic of hijab, modesty in other religions, the burkini, Nike performance hijab, and Western attempts at Muslim fashion. Start with the clothing brand SHUKR. So SHUKR was created by Sillwood, and it basically wanted to create Islamic clothing that could be accepted by Western society. They wanted to make clothing more contemporary and more fashion forward, and it was a brand created in the 2000s. I've added some photos of SHUKR fashion. Basically, they want to adhere to the standards of modest clothing for Muslim women, and they want to be true to what their culture follows. The clothing is loose, it's covering the body. Anna Sillwood, the creator of SHUKR, also wants models' faces to be cropped out, wants his own face to be cropped out, and just for the clothing to be in images. Basically, Muslim women are getting kind of a little bit of backlash in the West for how they dress. It's seen as oppressive, but with this clothing brand, what SHUKR plans to do is to make that clothing show expression and show that Muslim women can express themselves. We have the pants, which are loose with the flowy kind of tunic top in the picture of the red outfit, and then the black dress shows designs all through it, and it's very modest, but still very fashion forward and elegant and contemporary where the West can accept it. And basically, what SHUKR is trying to do is help Muslim women stay true to their faith and the core beliefs that they hold of being modest in their dress and being modest with how they look, but they don't want to stand out. And what this clothing is to do is kind of show that there isn't an oppression in choosing to be modest, which is what a lot of the West thinks is that when women dress like this, they're being forced to cover up. But a lot of women enjoy being modest in the way that they dress and take pride in it. So what SHUKR wants to do is basically allow women to be modest and be fashionable and be accepted by their Western. Now, on the topic of modesty, we want to talk a little bit about the hijab. Obviously, I don't want to go into too much detail about this because it is a very broad subject, but from what I read, I'm going to go into that. Obviously, there's many opinions on whether or not a woman chooses to wear a hijab, and it's their own personal journey of what they want to do with that, but I'm just going to talk about the article that I had read by a scholar who spoke about this and used references from the Quran. Basically, the idea of wearing a hijab is kind of debated at this point in the West just because of all the potential issues that could come with it, such as harassment, discrimination, things of that nature. So what this article did was talk about, is it okay for you to not wear your hijab in the West? And the conclusion from our author was that yes, if you feel as though you are possibly in danger because of how you present yourself with this hijab, do not wear it. That being said, it's in the end the woman's choice. She can do what she pleases, but this author was basically saying that if a woman does not want to wear her hijab because she feels threatened, that's understandable and acceptable. And in the Quran, it basically talked about how a woman's goal is to be modest for self-protection, and the covering of her head isn't specifically noted. It's basically a woman wants to be modest in general. It didn't specifically say to cover the head, but covering of the head is seen as modest as well. It's possible for a woman to be immodest with a head covering, so modesty is more of a mindset and an action than how you look in some sense. The hijab was also meant for class distinctions, and free women would dress very covered to show that they were of a higher class, and women who were enslaved did not actually really cover themselves. They would oftentimes be exposed from the navel to the knee. So being covered showed that you were of a higher class distinction and that anyone around should not harass you, should not try to intimidate you because you were of a higher class, which the hijab actually became very helpful. And not only the hijab, but the jilbab, which helped women cover completely. So even enslaved women would cover to avoid attention that they did not want, as would women who were free. So just to quickly touch on modesty in other religions, Muslim women aren't the only women who are supposed to cover their head during worship. Jewish women, Christian women, I have a picture of a nun. Many women are asked to cover their heads during worship, and in reference to 1 Corinthians 11:2-16, women were asked to cover their hair during worship because it was seen as dishonorable to have their hair out when they are of man. And basically this passage is saying that man is from God, woman is from man, and as man is from God, he doesn't have to cover his head because he is of God's glory, but since woman is of this non-godly being, she should cover her head. Otherwise, it's offensive that she's exposing her head in front of God. So women are deemed as someone who should be covered because they are not of the level that men are in this verse. Next, I want to talk about the burkini, and we're just going to go into some developments, kind of like SHUKR, that came about from Muslim women's fashion. So the burkini is basically sportswear, swimwear for Muslim girls, and they're able to engage in water activities for the first time that they were ever able to do before. This way, they don't have to compromise the way that they dress. They can remain modest, they can be a part of these activities and fully partake. And this garment gives them more freedom than you would think. A lot of Western thoughts would think that being covered up is showing that you're oppressed, but it's definitely not. These women now have the opportunity to participate in sports, to go outside and swim, and just be a part of this culture that they weren't able to be a part of before. This sports culture, this swim kind of surf culture, they're able to be a part of it now because they don't have to compromise their beliefs and their culture. The inventor of the burkini noted that it wasn't meant to symbolize Islam specifically, it was meant to symbolize modesty. And with that, women would use this in any faith. It's marketed to Muslim women, Christian women, Jewish women who want to cover up and show modesty. The Nike performance hijab is also another example of a fashion development for Muslim women that's come about. The performance hijab is actually very recent, despite women wearing hijab in sports isn't something that's new. That's been an occurrence for a long time now. The hijab wearers are now included in the athletic world and have the ability to play sports and be a part of physical activities while remaining modest. So this is athletically functional and also culturally correct because Nike took a lot of work and effort to make sure that this is something that Muslim women would want to wear and compete in, not only for the aspect of it being easy to move in or good fabric, but also being true to their culture. It's the first high quality, globally accessed athletic hijab that Muslim women can get to, so it's basically kind of a big deal now. It is a big deal because that's an amazing breakthrough for Muslim women in the sports industry. So here I just have a few pictures of the campaign for the Nike Performance Hijab and just showing women in different sports basically doing their sport without the hindrance of a traditional hijab that, while it's very nice for day-to-day life, might be difficult for sports or too heavy for sports. So if you'd like to just take a look, we have a woman boxing, fencing, running, just general sports, athletic world activity. Now I have a comic, and this is from the artist on Facebook, Yes, I'm Hot in Here. Her name is Huda. And basically this comic is great to transition into our next topic of Western Islamic fashion, which is kind of a contradiction, but we'll look into that later. And it's basically about how most Western people feel as though women want to be freed from the hijab, but that's not the case. Women enjoy being modest. They do it because they want to, not because they feel the need that they have to. So here we have Western attempts at Muslim fashion. So Western brands recently have been making the effort to be inclusive and try to Westernize Muslim fashions. And it really begs the question, who are they being inclusive towards? Are they trying to make this more normal for Westerners, and kind of ignoring important elements of Muslim women's fashion just to make Westerners comfortable with it. And specifically, we take a look at Dolce & Gabbana, who used a Muslim women's fashion line as a way to kind of get into this market of Muslim women in fashion. But in the end, their clothing was misrepresenting the ideals of a Muslim woman and the ideals of modesty, and basically kind of culturally appropriated what Muslim women's modesty stands for. So we're just going to take a look at that and discuss it. In Dolce & Gabbana, they've completely that. And here we just have more clothes from SHUKR embodying what Muslim women would typically wear. These are very nice clothes. They're very well put together. They're beautiful, and they are very modest. So in conclusion, we see that fashion is working to be more inclusive to Muslim women. We see it successfully with SHUKR, burkini, and the Nike performance hijab, but it can be unsuccessful for people who aren't really putting in the effort to make it inclusive to Muslim women and not try to put it to Westerners, which we saw with Dolce & Gabbana. We saw hijabs in the West and the idea of wearing one versus the idea of not wearing one. And then we saw head coverings for women in other religions, which we saw with the verse from Corinthians.